Today's guest is a trailblazing digital art curator who is pushing the boundaries of what's possible in the realm of NFTs and blockchain. Before she started working with NFTs, our guest honed her skills at several prestigious museums, including the High Museum of Art in Atlanta. She remains passionate about nurturing artists and innovating digital art spaces. A huge welcome to our guest today, Capucine Jenkins. Hello.
Hi, what a great intro.
I cannot wait for this session, and I know there's lots of people waiting for this session too, because right now our biggest question is NFTs. We have a big community, and it is 100% the top question that is being asked at the moment. So thank you so much for coming in.
Yeah, for sure. I'm excited to answer them.
So I think the place we need to start, first of all, is what are they?
Yeah.
Because I know there's people here that have probably seen NFTs coming up. They've probably got a message on Instagram from somebody saying they want to buy their NFT and they have no idea what NFTs are. I'm in that camp. I have to say, I'm excited. I have no idea what NFTs are. So when I get asked, I'm like, I have no idea. So this is exciting for me too.
Yeah, no, I'll just give like a very, there'll be words in this very brief definition that
Yeah.
might startle you. Don't let that happen.
Yeah.
So basically what an NFT is, it's sort of an abbrev for non-fungible token. And it's basically just a unique digital asset or item that's stored on the blockchain.
Yeah.
Sounds easy. It is really easy. It's just esoteric.
Yeah.
The blockchain, just to also just kind of explain what that is a decentralized digital ledger that allows for secure and transparent transactions. So I sort of like to, maybe that's like a good place to sort of start, like looking at the
Yeah.
bigger picture of, what blockchain even is,
Yeah.
before we get into the actual blocks, which would take into consideration the tokens.
Yeah.
But blockchain, I always give this analogy, and sometimes it helps, is thinking of the blockchain or the ledger as like an accountant's log that essentially everyone can see, everyone has access to view, but is tamper free. So
Mhm.
that is the most straightforward way. The only difference is that instead of it being sort of an analog manual,
Mhm.
a process, it's really more of a digital
Yeah.
process. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think that's why it's difficult for some people to understand. It's those people that need to see something visual or tangible in their minds, isn't it?
For
And
sure.
so if we can't visualize it, it's like, what is it?
No, for sure. I mean, you could
Yeah.
quite literally think about it if it does feel a little too abstract. Think about really just like a very unique item, like that you hold in
Yeah.
your hand, or an asset for
Yeah.
anyone who, I don't know, invest or has a house. You can't copy your house. I mean, you could, but it
Mm.
wouldn't be, you wouldn't have the deed to the original home, things
Yeah.
like that. So
Yeah. Yeah.
if you need to kind of make it a little more concrete, like, there are countless examples where you can do that so that, you can make it a little more familiar to you.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what can you turn into an NFT? So what types of art are suitable?
Yeah. Um, uh, Technically, any work of art, even physical, could be minted. The
Hmm.
most straightforward way, of course, is having and this is primarily what I work with, digital artists or physical artists who have digitized their work, minting those into NFTs. I will say, just kind of to give a little more context about NFTs and their use, is ultimately what a token is just metadata in the same way that a file is an image file.
Hmm.
If you actually kind of peer into like the information on the back end, it's really just a bunch of code.
Hmm.
So ultimately, what when you mint a token, you're just making a bunch of data visible for other people to see.
Yeah.
So sort of with that in mind, really any artwork, especially if it's digital, or anything that's digitized, could 100% be an NFT. Then it's just a matter of, I guess, quality control. What do you want to mint? What is, I guess your great artwork that you really want the world to see, and that's, kind of etched in stone on this ledger. I guess that's kind of the next question.
Yeah, it's mind blowing. So you can take a sculpture, like a physical sculpture, and mint that.
Well, there are a few
Yeah.
ways you can go about it. So I've seen artists sort of like digitize. So whether it's, taking a photo of it, or they can be really creative. And I love to see like what artists are kind of doing right now, like really kind of
Yeah.
using NFTs as like a different medium for,
Hmm.
from which they can kind of take this original artwork, and then, maybe take photos from multiple angles, and then sort of digitize those images, and then create this whole new work in order to mint. Usually they're a little more straightforward than that. They digitize
Yeah.
their work, and then mint that. But I've also seen artists, and this is one maybe a little more functional way that NFTs work, is that you can actually mint or tokenize a physical artwork, and as a way to verify its authenticity. So
Okay.
you can use it in a very practical way as sort of like a COA, a certificate of authenticity.
Yeah.
I've also seen many artists do that, and we'll probably get into this a little bit, but
Hmm.
one really great thing about the blockchain, because it is sort of like a record of transactions, or some people like to think of it as a record of receipts, is that you can sort of use it as a means of provenance.
Hmm.
So you can keep basically your portfolio, and COAs kind of encapsulate it onto the blockchain. So there are a few ways,
Ah,
either practically, or you can be maybe a little more creative, and kind of create a whole new work specifically for that NFT.
wow.
Yeah.
And so you're kind of like documenting the whole work. So when you're talking about minting, what's that process exactly, or tokenizing? What's that bit of the process look like?
Yeah. I could get into like more of a product mind and really talk through like what's actually happening.
Yeah.
Ultimately what I'll say is that um, is you would set up a digital wallet,
Yeah.
um, and have your artwork ready, digital artwork ready, and basically you would deploy a smart contract. And this is, you can, they're now, I mean, maybe a couple years ago, this wasn't really possible. You had to really know how to code. But there are platforms like Manifold, for example, where you can deploy a smart contract, and they make it really like foolproof, where, you get like a couple of prompts, and they ask you to upload, image file, title of artwork, additional data or information, and then you click a button to mint it, and it's done. So like, the process itself can be really straightforward, especially since there, now many platforms that have made it really user friendly for artists to be able to mint their work. I've actually had multiple artists who have said, "Yeah, I figured it out. I like now have my artwork minted." And of course, you may not know what to do from there, but
Yeah.
actually minting now, actually minting now is quite easy. But ultimately, what's happening when you deploy a smart contract is you're allowing a transaction to happen.
Yeah.
So when you're entering the image and the metadata and things like that, basically what you're doing is creating a block,
Hmm.
and when you deploy it fully through, and mint the tokens, it then attaches to the chain. So
Wow. I
yeah,
think I'm getting my head around it now in this crazy way for the first time in years.
if you think about it, maybe, if you think about it in more familiar terms, it kind of starts to come together piece by piece.
Yeah, yeah. I actually, I've always been like, oh no, no, I can't go there. But now I'm actually quite excited to just have a work minted. I just want to do this now. You've made me quite excited about minting a piece
Yeah,
to
you
go
should.
through the experience. Yeah, definitely. I think there'll be people listening here now thinking, especially because of the ways you've just described around, it's kind of it's making that imprint as well of your work in the world, isn't it? And that idea I really love, and also cataloging. And so you've just opened up my mind to so many different ways of NFT being useful as opposed to just selling that on, which we'll talk about, we'll get to. So I'm an artist then, so I've taken some photographs of my work, and I've gone on to this site, done the contract, entered the metadata, uploaded the image, press the button, and in effect, then that is the terminology I'm just getting my head around. It's tokenized, is that right? And minted. They're the same thing.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And that exists then on the blockchain.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, right, we're getting there, folks. And so I guess the next question then is, once that's happened, yeah, what is the next step then? And I think that actually leads to one of the questions that was sent in, um, which was around, oh gosh, let me just see. Yeah, it was around, I've kind of minted my artwork and I've taken those steps. So well done, Carol. That was Carol that said that question in. So I've taken that step, I've minted them, but now I've got no idea what to do next. Like, what do I do with these now? So that's such a great question.
Yeah, no, for sure. I would say the maybe natural next step is to choose a platform. And that seems, maybe really, it sounds really straightforward, but, there's a fair amount of research that kind of goes into that. One is, you want to pick, and there are a number of NFT marketplaces out right now. Again, maybe 2.5 years ago, that wasn't necessarily the case, but now you have OpenSea, Super Rare Foundation, First Dibs. There are a number of marketplaces that are now on the market for selling, trading, and buying NFTs. But I guess some things to kind of keep in mind when you are choosing a platform. One is that there's still a fair amount of marketplaces that are invite only. So you can sort of, as an artist, you can apply to have your work sold or have kind of basically like a storefront, digital storefront for your artwork. They might like approve or deny you based on their internal criteria. So that's one thing to really consider. If you're maybe an artist who's really not just getting started with NFTs but also just getting started overall in your career, maybe invite only isn't really what you want to do. I believe Super Rare is an invite only and just generally a little more exclusive. A platform like OpenSea, for example, they're sort of open invitation, and they've been around for a really long time, and they've definitely made things on the front end really user friendly for artists. Another thing to consider is discoverability. So like I just mentioned, OpenSea or really other open invite sort of marketplaces kind of allow really anyone to upload, which is great because they're accessible. The only issue sometimes is that when it comes to being discovered, having really kind of connecting an artist and their artwork to a collector is a little more difficult. You can't really filter out if a collector really wants like a blue NFT and you're getting lost in a sea of other blue NFT, hundreds of thousands. It's a
Yeah,
little difficult.
yeah,
So that's kind of the advantage of having, maybe like an invite only, or being a part of an invite only platform.
yeah,
Um, Another thing also to consider is, I guess, sort of being paired up or even sort of using a platform as your curator. I think this is really important. You know, obviously working and building marketplaces kind of from the ground up. One thing that I was really passionate about kind of going into it and really over the course of, my decade or so career as a curator is there being an advocate for artists, especially emerging artists. And so, when you incorporate this new technology into an artist's practice, when, they're kind of already working, it's like this new element that they sort of have to work with. Having someone there to kind of, guide them through the product end of things, helping them commercialize this new product, really. It's something that they really can consider. And, many marketplaces thankfully do have curators on, sort of on site. But it is worthwhile really kind of like reaching out to curators. Many of us in the Web3 space are pretty open and willing to talk. I mean, that's what's really great about this space is that everyone really is really connected and really willing to share and build on things kind of for the greater good. So yeah, that's the first next natural step after
Yeah.
you mint it.
I'd love to just interject with some more questions before we move on from to the next part of the process, because I love what you've just said there around your role as a curator in the digital space. Can you expand a little bit more about what that means? Curating in the digital space, I guess, again, is mind blowing. When you were talking then, I was trying to liken it to galleries. So when you were talking about an invite only marketplace, I was imagining that as a kind of gallery that has private collectors, and you get selected to be in that gallery based on their clients. And then you might have another gallery that's a vanity gallery where there's no submission request. They'll just take anybody and they've just got an open door with people coming and going. Is that where it's kind of similar, I guess, in what you were just describing there?
Yeah, it is. It
Yeah.
is sort of. It's interesting. Marketplaces, NFT marketplaces, don't really describe it in that way. Some do, and they
Yeah.
think about curation, but
Yeah.
when it comes to having a gallery format, it really is fairly similar. And
Yeah.
part the curator in the art space, in the art world, and also now in NFTs, they wear multiple hats.
Yeah.
But, and I think maybe the most obvious way of thinking about a curator is someone who helps an artist kind of commercialize their work, which is very, very important, not to undermine that.
Yeah.
But another role of a curator, which is equally as important, is having someone really sort of be this guide for artists to be able to navigate, make the right choices, really have someone who's in a way like holding their hand through this process, through their career.
Yeah.
Occasionally I'll call it artist management. Just like any other career, you really have to, unlike, any other industry, maybe engineering or tech consulting or anything like that, that's a
Yeah.
very clear linear path where artists unfortunately don't have that advantage. There isn't always precedence
Yeah.
to their next step. And I think what a curator, I don't think I know, what a curator's role really is helping artists get to that next level.
See, I bet so many people are sitting here didn't even know this role existed. There you go. Isn't it amazing? We're having our eyes open to this world. And so many people who already know about NFTs, I would imagine, didn't know that role exists, that there are people there to help you, like Capucine. And so, do you also work with the marketplace organizations as well as a curator? So, kind of like bridging the gap, or do you work with them in a different capacity?
Yeah, it sort of happens one way or the other. At first, Dibs and Saatchi Art, I was doing it internally, but I've also worked with other marketplaces too, sort of as a consultant in some ways. It's sort of, I mean, it's such a nascent space that the orgs aren't necessarily consistent across the board,
Yeah. Yeah.
definitely internally, like Super also too has curators or curatorial board.
Yeah.
And curators also tend to be the people who, especially for invite only platforms, are the ones who kind of like have that criteria for, like we're sort of looking for this, like this is kind of the supplier, the artwork we have right now. We're really looking for something that deviates a little bit for this so that we have like a really diverse range of artwork
Hmm.
for the collectors. And that's one way that curators kind of work internally, but externally too, curators also kind of like bring in artists that might be a part of their community or their individual roster, bring them on for maybe an individual project with a marketplace, or it might even be for a series of exhibitions or like activations.
Yeah. So if a person, let's just use Carol as an example, who has set up a collection and has this their NFTs sitting waiting now on the blockchain, how would someone like Carol? It sounds like you need to kind of network with the marketplace companies
Yeah.
because they're the key to pushing this out into places where people want to buy them. And so, would a curator be the best person to kind of work with in terms of that, would you say, in terms of building those relationships and finding the right place? Because I would imagine it could be just a sea of marketplace and you don't know where to start. And
Yeah, no, for sure. A curator is sort of your best bet ultimately.
mm, mm,
I will say, and I think there was a question too that was kind of asking, like, what's sort of a surefire way to be able to sell your NFTs well?
yeah,
And I think this kind of goes in tandem. Having a curator that's again, kind of an advocate for you, like helping you manage your career.
yeah,
But also too, I think it's really valuable for artists to sort of like follow major players in like the Web3 or NFT space, whether
yeah.
that's investors or kind of what they call like micro influencers, or different marketplaces on Twitter, or some of them on Instagram, but primarily on
Yeah,
Twitter.
yeah,
Following them and kind of like tracking like what the trends are and kind
yeah.
of what they're looking at or what they're thinking about, or like what new technology there is for artists. And I think kind of being able to create your network there, either with those major players or even with other artist communities. Personally, I think apart from having a curator, definitely, and I cannot stress this enough, definitely being a part of or joining some kind of online artist community will be incredibly valuable to an artist who's just getting started.
Yeah.
I have noticed that many artists, kind of collectives or community in the Web3 and NFT space, they have created, I guess, kind of this almost like insular economy within their network. So, like one artist who maybe is a little more well established, they have a sale, and the maybe there's a treasury that like buys maybe half of their collection, or there are a couple of artists in the collective who buy one of their, just to support. And it's really this kind of like cyclical way of like making sure that artists are selling and being able to pay their rent and things like that. But they really made this economy, this artist creative economy, ultimately, sort of just within their network. So I think that's one really big way that, one among many, honestly, but one
Yeah.
really big way that artists can not only just, sort of sell their work, but also to kind of work with a person or a community of people that will help them really kind of get to the next place that they need to go.
Yeah, that this is starting to make sense. Thank you. This is good. And so then I just need to get my head around. So the marketplace, how are people searching
Mm.
for this? Like, so if I wanted to go and buy an NFT and I would go to the marketplace to go and buy one, would I? And then what is I guess I need to just go and have a look at the platform. But do you literally, are you typing in what kind of artwork you want, or is there something else going on here that you're searching for? That's
Yeah, no, it really is. I mean, as simple as kind of doing a really cursory search of NFT marketplaces, and you would think, especially with Google, you would think that you would get this like sea of honestly like a cesspool of just like awful marketplaces. But I
yeah.
will say that really over the course of again probably like 2 years, 2.5 years. There have been some really standout marketplaces that have become super reputable, are heavily funded, that are really just like hard hitters in the space. Like they really are places you sort of want your storefront to be.
Yeah.
So Super Rare and Foundation, and obviously Saatchi has theirs, and First Dips has theirs. Rareable. There's so many. But even like your first two or three pages are like really solid NFT marketplaces, and I
Yeah.
think that's really the onus a little bit is on the artist to really see what is a good fit for them. Well, I guess the artist and the curator
Yeah. Yeah.
see like what's a really good fit for them and their artwork and kind of where they are in their career.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it really is kind of like a thankfully it's not you're getting like hundreds and hundreds of like really terrible marketplaces. You like just a
Yeah.
really simple search, you kind of get like a really good diverse set of marketplaces, and then from there kind of doing a little research and seeing kind of what works best for you.
Yeah, that's really good to know. That's very reassuring, I'm sure, for people listening. And then when you go and actually buy an NFT, do you see all the data and the image, and you're seeing it all as this what the artist inputted when they tokenized it? And who's buying these? Like, why? I know people are sitting there going, why? Why would I buy an NFT? And I go, that's subjective. It's a subjective question. But in your experience, like, yeah, what's the benefit for someone buying an NFT as opposed to just buying the original artwork from the artist?
Yeah, that I get this question so much, and it's very fair. The thing that I would say, there are sort of two ways, similar to why an artist would incorporate it into their practice. One is the more practical one, and one is the other kind of more subjective, creative response. Like I will say that many collectors, in the same way with physical art, are thinking about the NFT as an investment. So one thing they really ask all the time is this going to, have value? Am I going to get a return on this investment in some way? And that's for the curator and the market to kind of decide. And also too with an NFT, another way for I guess collectors to, especially new, like young collectors, when they're thinking about art collecting, beginning their journey in that way, they feel really secure about having an artwork that they can, well, one, show off because, you have the ledger, everyone can see it, but also two, that verifies that they are the owner, no
Yeah,
matter what, and it verifies that this
yeah,
work of art is original and it's authentic. So I think, younger, definitely more tech savvy collectors who are interested in fine art, but, maybe a little too intimidated by, physical art galleries,
yeah,
or museums, or, they really their lives are digital. They really
yeah,
live online.
yeah,
To be able to share it, or even, even if they did have their physical apartment, be able to kind of translate this digital life that they have onto their wall, the
yeah,
display or whatever.
yeah,
That really is kind of what's skewing at least one demographic, one
yeah.
persona of collectors who are really getting into NFTs and fine art NFTs in particular. They skew young and tech savvy.
Yeah, yeah,
Sure.
yeah. And what about pricing? I mean, this probably is a whole other podcast episode, but are there any guidelines on pricing, just very top level? Because I know there's so many factors that apply to pricing artwork without it being an NFT, based on the market and who's buying and where you put it. And is there any kind of top level guidelines on pricing for anyone that wants to get started, or a place you would recommend to look?
Yeah, for sure. I would say just kind of right off the top of my head, at least in terms of artist advice, is it really helps if you do have a strong sales history. Many artists have, even if it, sort of seems as if they're many artists who are just like very prolific and they're really like pumping out artworks or NFTs. It really does help if you have, even if it's one sale, even if it's two sales, it really helps if you have that. Just sort of, it signals to a collector that, you're serious, you're not really just, this isn't a money grab for you. You would be surprised, a lot of Web3 collectors are really invested in the ethos of Web3, of really making a decentralized space for everyone to be able to access things like collecting art or investing in, a cryptocurrency that could be one day $100 and tomorrow $2,000,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So, gosh, what was
yeah.
it? Yeah, so I think that, an artist having a strong sales history is a really big deal.
Mm,
Also, too, being a part of sort of like a vetted platform, like, yeah, like Super Rare or an invite only platform, again, signals to a collector that, oh, you're really serious. These platforms that I've bought NFTs from before, really beautiful or really interesting to look at, or really like they feel culturally relevant. I've bought from them before. Wow, like this artist is a part of that artist community. I want to
yeah,
buy from them. So
yeah,
yeah, I think already that kind of like elevates your market.
yeah,
Um, so and again, not to pull curators into this, but I also think there is, some power that curators have as an authority on fine art in general. So to really
yeah,
be able to kind of translate the meaning of NFT art to a collector or to a community,
yeah.
DAOs or orgs or anything like that, really kind of, investing meaning into those for people who may not necessarily, be art minded.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And it's very similar to your physical pieces, in that you're building those relationships, and it's translating the purpose and connections and finding the sweet spot of what you have and what somebody else wants. So yeah, that all makes total sense. Jay has a question here. I'm interested in NFTs, but like Bitcoin, I hear that they are bad for the environment. I want to know how that compares to the impact of social media and websites. And there's a few people that said, yeah, I'd like to know more about this.
Yeah, no, it genuinely is a really big concern, and I do think, thankfully, there have been a number of networks or blockchain networks that have taken that into consideration, have been really serious about the environmental impact, sort of from the beginning. One of those is Polygon, and Tezos is another. Although actually Tezos coins aren't available everywhere. In certain countries, they're not available, and I think in the United States, they're not available in certain states. But also to Ethereum, which is as well, whoever knows this, Ethereum is probably the most popular blockchain network right now, and it recently moved from proof of work to proof of stake, which is basically like when I was describing the blocks before and how they're kind of added to the ledger. So that is where probably the most extractive part of the minting process is. It's really just, when people are thinking about the environmental concern, what they're saying really is that, wow, this is using too much computational power.
Yeah,
And so essentially what the network had done was change that process to where it's much more efficient, and much better. I don't remember the percentage, but it was like this really insane percentage of the difference between when the network was proof of work to proof to stake, like maybe 70% decrease,
Wow.
but maybe
Yeah.
even more. But yeah, I just to reassure, artists or really anyone who's interested in NFTs that this is a concern for developers for sure, that they're kind of every day working on making sure that we're thinking about how extractive that process is and how we can make the technology work for us and the earth too.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, it's a really big question, isn't it? And it's one that, yeah, I mean, it can translate to everything that we are doing in life at the moment. And yeah, yeah, it's
Sure.
okay. There's a question here. Can cryptocurrency be exchanged for real money?
Yeah, short answer is yes. So, just to clarify, I guess, sort of the difference between cryptocurrency and fiat. Fiat currency, USD, for example, is a stable coin. So, really, no matter what, if I give you a dollar for something, that is what it will always be.
Yeah.
Whereas with cryptocurrency or crypto coins, they're not stable coins. So often we'll see we saw this with Bitcoin when Elon Musk invested into Bitcoin, where one day one bit will be $1,000, and tomorrow, because of the market fluctuations, it could be $2. I mean, that's like actually extreme, but
Yeah. Yeah.
just that's
Yeah. But
kind of
it's
what's
possible.
happening.
Mm.
Yeah, so the value of a product fluctuates, whereas with a more stable coin, the value, this pencil costing $1 tomorrow, it will also cost a dollar.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's first kind of how the difference between fiat and unstable coins are. However, and this actually is a good question. However, there are many apps and different kinds of software. It sounds complicated, but it's actually really simple. They've made it really simple over the course of a few years for you to take your USD or really whatever currency, whatever fiat currency you have, and being able to convert that to any cryptocurrency actually on the market. Um, E- Ethereum is the most, ETH is the most commonly used, so is Bitcoin. But I guess the risk in doing that is that, if you put in $200 of USD or 200 USD, um, tomorrow that might be, and you convert that to ETH, and that's, I don't know, 2 ETH.
Yeah.
And tomorrow, because of the market fluctuation, it's 1 ETH now. So I guess the risk is that, whatever amount of money you put into something, you expect to either make more money or at least have it be stable at whatever price you kind of, or whatever, currency
Yeah.
you put into the system.
Yeah.
But, that could fluctuate. The pro
Mm.
of that, though, is that you could actually make a lot of money off of
Fast.
$200. Yeah, quickly. Um,
If you know
there,
what you're doing as well, if you know what you're investing in. So, can
right.
I just clarify for the listeners, the cryptocurrency is separate from NFTs, isn't it? In that when you're dealing in NFTs, it's normal currency. You're
Yeah.
not trading in cryptocurrency. It's yeah.
Yeah. So thankfully, there have been, and this is probably a consideration for artists too when they're thinking about what platforms to choose. But there are a number of platforms like Nifty Gateway, I believe, has like a fiat payment process. So, you can buy an NFT with your credit card.
Yeah.
I will say that the reason why there's a correlation between cryptocurrency and NFTs is that the blockchain receives the transactions with cryptocurrency. However, thankfully, as a collector, you don't necessarily have to engage
Yeah.
with, that end of the market.
Yeah.
thankfully there are other platforms that have really made it easier for collectors now to be able to just kind of use their credit card and be done with it.
Yeah.
Not
Okay. Yeah.
everyone has like a risky
Yeah.
financial spirit. So,
Yeah.
yeah, many platforms have made it easy for, I guess, fiat users to be able to buy NFTs without necessarily having to deal with that other stuff.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Okay, there's a question here. What would the expected costs for an artist be to get themselves set up with NFTs? Are there any ongoing costs?
Actually, no. I would say the only real like out of pocket costs would maybe be like gas fees. And basically, what gas fees are is, I guess maybe going back to the environmental concern is when you mint tokenize like an artwork, because that takes computational power, it takes gas like a car.
Hmm.
Usually it's no more than like a couple dollars.
Yeah.
And once you pay it, you don't have to pay it anymore.
Yeah.
But there are no, that I can think of, there are no sort of ongoing costs, which again is another benefit of working with NFTs.
Yeah. Yeah. And then there's another great question here, which I'm sure this one comes up so much. How do we safeguard ourselves to ensure that we're not getting ripped off? So, I mean, there's a couple of ways to look at this question as well, because there are loads of NFT hunters, my audience have been calling them, which I think is so funny. So, the NFT hunters are the people that are sending you messages on Instagram and social media saying, sell your artwork to me and I'll turn it into an NFT. And so, have you got any advice around safeguarding that? And then there's also, I guess, once you've created an NFT, it's selling it safely, that part as well, which I guess is the marketplace. That's where they protect you, isn't it? So doing it in the proper through the proper channel.
Yeah, no, for
Yeah.
sure. Definitely working with a reputable marketplace when it comes to
Yeah.
selling. Marketplace and a curator. Those two avenues are probably the most secure way that you can sell your NFTs.
Yeah.
Sort of what they do is vet their collectors too. The collectors and buyers, they vet them so that, the artist doesn't really have to deal with that end of things.
Yeah.
When it comes to NFT hunters, which is really funny, I love that that label. I would say, and a lot of artists that I've worked with too have received like, oh, I have this collector who really loves my work, but they want an NFT of it. Can you help me with that? I sort of always tell them verification is a really big deal. I think generally just using social media, you'll receive bots or whatever.
Yeah.
But the first thing is to verify. So if you know the collector personally, like they have bought from you previously and they're really interested in NFTs, like, okay, that might be a serious like inquiry. Whereas I would also say, alternatively, what not to do is to give away your wallet address or your wallet information. Also, no personal information. And again, I think this is just kind of just common advice for dealing with anything online or digitally.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those would be my two areas of advice. But like when you're looking at an account and this isn't a collector that you sort of peep on their account and it's just like post
Mm.
after post of like, would you like to make more money with Bitcoin? Like this very markety kind of, this feels like
Yeah.
sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I think really just that kind of um, almost like common sense approach to just dealing with anyone online and kind of like what makes sense and really figuring out if this person is serious about your work as much as you are, and if they're really invested in buying and collecting from you.
And I guess if you do end up going down this route and you put your work on a marketplace, you just link them to the marketplace and say, wonderful, thank you for your interest. Here's my link. So
Yeah.
that would be the most sensible thing to do, is just direct them to, there you go, you can go and buy it right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if not, if you just say, I'm only comfortable, you've got the lingo now, Capucine has come in, so you can reply back saying, I'm only comfortable selling through a marketplace, unless you are a legitimate marketplace. I'm not interested, thank you very much. Or,
Yeah.
it's just someone
No.
who's trying to get your artwork from you.
Yeah, or
Yeah,
I mean, you're welcome to also direct them to, a curator or curator that you work
yeah,
with, so that
yeah,
they can kind of, give this collector, like highlights or a preview of your work in a more like intimate, like high
yeah,
touch experience with the collector. And
yeah,
usually when that happens, that's also like the sort of the difference between the marketplace and the curator is able to kind of give that more white glove experience to the
yeah,
collector, and they're much more likely to buy, as
yeah,
opposed to, kind of like browsing your storefront,
yeah.
which still works. It's just kind of like a difference in that way.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, the last question that's come in is around, are there any current trends? How would we research what is selling? Is there a way to look at certain products that are actually popular? Is there any advice there for artists wanting to do a bit of research?
Yeah, so trends is so funny. Web3, it's just a amalgamation of a lot of trends at once. So it's really funny that they asked that. But yeah, I would say, and there's been a little, I guess being on Twitter maybe is becoming a little more controversial every day, but Web3 is the most active, and so are NFT artists and collectors, and the most active on Twitter. That's also where you can find investors and micro influencers. And I would say probably pick like five of those kind of types, an angel investor, I guess mission forward or mission driven org, an artist you really love, a collector that you really love, and like a micro influencer, someone who just generally writes about the space and like what's new or what's happening or what's different.
Yeah.
Um, I would probably follow those, five types of people in the space. And from there, you really kind of, just like with any kind of social media platform, you really start to like grow your feed and your network, and you're really seeing like what other people are seeing, and especially what other people that you're interested in are also interested in. So I think that's a really good way to kind of keep up with trends and like what's hot
Yeah.
at the moment.
Yeah.
And if you're sort of someone who's a little more invested in like smaller communities or smaller groups, Web3 is also really active on Discord too. So, once you kind of have this more broad look at like, these types of people or your feed that has more of like a broad sense of the trends, you can kind of, zoom in and start to follow like very, very specific communities. And, from there, obviously, you can kind of build a more intimate network and things like that. But I would say just first step is kind of like follow those five, and just kind of see how your feed grows and see what trends are really kind of coming up for you.
Amazing advice. Web3, are they a mark? What is Web3? Sorry.
Oh, yeah. So Web3 is this kind of loosely organized ecosystem of a variety of different, again, major players, investors, whales,
Yeah.
um, orgs, companies, tech
Yeah.
companies,
Okay. Yeah.
artist communities, gaming communities, really just this like ecosystem
Yeah.
that has a unifying, I would say currency, but a unifying sort of economy and ethos. And that's ultimately the ethos is this idea of everything sort of being accessible to everyone and not being striated into different kinds of, I guess, different, I don't know, types of industries and communities. It's really a way so that all different kinds of communities can interact with the other, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah. It does. Yeah. 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 Oh, this has been, I've learned so much. Thank you. If somebody wants to work with you, Capucine, in your capacity as curator and learn more from you and maybe follow you, work with you, what are the steps for that? Where can people find you?
Yeah, I would say the first is I am on Twitter. Lately, I've been a little slower because I've been working on this monster of a project. It's an IRL activation, so it just takes me being in the space a lot more and
Yeah.
going to different auctions and things like that. But I will pick up. next month for sure. But my Twitter handle is at CAPJ _ ETH. But also feel free to shoot me an email. It's hello@capucinejenkins.com. I finally figured out what my security breach was. It's a little scary for a minute there, but I was kind of blocked out of my
Oh,
email for
yeah,
a
we don't want to
while.
be blocked out of emails. I know.
Yeah.
Oh,
Um, but
oh, super.
yeah, please feel free
Yeah,
to email me, and
yeah,
I'm fairly receptive, and
yeah.
um, so yeah, yeah, for sure.
Super.
DM me
Oh,
on Twitter is probably the best. I think
yeah,
I'll be able to actually send you links to
yeah,
things and
yeah.
things like that, and it's like very quick, much easier to kind of engage that way. But yeah,
Wonderful. We'll put all of these links below. So if you're watching this right now, just scroll down below. You can click the links to go and follow Capucine, and we'll put all the details below. So thank you so much. Thank you to everybody tuning in. I know that you're all going to be like, yes, finally we have the answers, the NFT answers. Thank you so much, Capucine, for taking the time to share this with our audience. I really appreciate you, and really am so grateful for you sharing that and taking that time out. So
oh,
big,
for
big,
sure.
big
Yeah,
thanks.
it was a pleasure for sure.
Okay, well, I'll see you all next week when we're back for Motivational Monday. Take care, my friends. Goodbye. See ya. Bye.